Hello, everyone. For what it's worth, thought I'd get on here today and upload something to YouTube. I haven't done that for a while. So, here goes nothing. Those of you who watch my channel, who are also subscribed to Jeff McCormick's channel, Mega Jeff McRockmac, probably saw him do a video a few weeks ago on this band that I'm going to talk about, which is the band Saint, as you can tell, probably know by my shirt. This is one of the latest pickups, Saint-related pickups for me, is the shirt I'm wearing. And you'll see the other Saint-related recent pickup later on in this video. But anyway, those of you who watch Jeff's channel too probably saw his video on this band, but I thought I'd throw in my 2 cents or penny, whatever you want to call it, about Saint. And as I said in my comments, watching Jeff's video was kind of like a trip down memory lane. Saint is a band I don't revisit too often now. I was heavily into them for a while, which I'll discuss more in this video. There's a time I was more into them than I was Striper. But without further ado, I'll get into a little bit of the background of Saint. Their debut was in 1984. Hopefully this can show up. It's showing up awfully dark on camera. But their Warriors of the Sun EP came out in 1984. And as you could probably see with the way they're dressed and also the way their sound was back at this time, they were heavily compared to Judas Priest. And vocalist Josh Kramer does have that Halford quality to his voice. I'm not saying he's on par with Halford. Some of you may think he is. Those of you who have heard him, some of you may think he's not. I'll leave that up to personal opinion. But there are similarities between him and Rob Halford, vocally. And I remember being blown away by this EP when it first came out. The raw production of it, it just blew me away because I was into looking for the heavier the better that at that time in my life. And this got heavy rotation with me when I got the cassette way back when. And my favorite song on here is probably my favorite all-time Saint song. Is called Abyss. The title track, Warriors of the Sun, Vicars of Fate, Legions of the Dead. Abyss and Legions of the Dead are probably my top 2 songs on this. Like I said, very rawly produced, but I love it. They did a re-record of this a few years back, and added 2 tracks to it to make it an 8-track release. Not an 8-track release as far as the 8-track tapes go, but a release with 8 tracks on it. I used to have that re-record in my collection. I don't now. The production's not so raw on it, but I didn't find myself liking it as much as the original, so I no longer have that in my collection right now. But anyway, that's enough on Warriors of the Sun. 2 years later, in '86, they came out with their first full-length album. And that is Time's End. Now, Time's End is where they started to form their reputation as far as what their lyrical content was going to be. And they kind of showed it here in this one with the song Legions of the Dead. But a lot of the influence in their lyrics come from the book of Revelation in the Bible. Time's End and a lot of their material after Time's End shows that in spades. Heavily produced. As a matter of fact, the shirt says apocalyptic metal. Um, considering with all that's going on in the world right now, listening to some of these songs as I have today, kind of revisiting them more again, it's kind of interesting to listen to them in this day and age with all that's going on in our world and in our individual country, those of us here in the U.S. But I won't belabor that point. I'll get on to their third release, which is my favorite, Too Late for Living. Most people in Saint fandom say Time's End is their best release, and it's a doggone good release, but I favor Too Late for Living more. The apocalyptic theme is here in a lot of the songs, such as The Path, Through the Sky. The Path is probably my favorite song on here, but it's not as heavily. The apocalyptic theme isn't as heavily part of this album as it was Time's End. That being said, The Path is still probably my favorite song. There's a good instrumental prior to The Path, which is called Returning. Saint has some good instrumentals, and that's probably their best instrumental. But the title track, all the songs are good on here. There's a song, Star Pilot, that would later get a sequel song called Star Pilot The Return. Now, after this, Saint went away for a few years. And they went and resurfaced till around 99, I believe, where they released another EP, which I don't have in my collection anymore. I had it in a collection that featured these 3 albums and that one, but I no longer have that. And the EP was called The Perfect Life, which had a different singer. I can't remember his name right now. And one thing that I should mention is Saint is a band that heavy lineup changes in it. The only constant member has been Richard Lynch, the bassist, who founded the band. But anyway, on to The Perfect Life. There was a different singer whose name escapes me right now. And they didn't even have a drummer. They used a drum machine to record this EP. And it wasn't very well received. Because it was more, in some people's eyes, dare I say, pop metal, quote unquote, hair metal style compared to the straight up metal style of the previous 3 releases. So it wasn't really well received. I didn't mind the album, the EP, the one time I heard it, but won't belabor that point. Then back around 2003, Saint would resurface again. Josh Kramer would return to do the vocals, and they released In the Battle. In the Battle is the album that features the follow-up song to the song Star Pilot from Too Late for Living that I mentioned, called Star Pilot The Return. There's a song on here called Acid Rain, which is the last song on the album, going back to the Judas Priest influence, that in my thinking kind of reminds me, in a way, of Painkiller. I don't know, maybe Other people wouldn't think so, but to my ear, it kind of had the Painkiller vibe to it in the way Josh sang that song. But anyway, 2003's In the Battle, the apocalyptic themes are here, but again, it's not all throughout the album, which is kind of a refresher in sometimes. Um, so I highly enjoy this album. Now the follow-up is all about the apocalyptic, theme. They would follow up In the Battle a few years later with a concept album on the Book of Revelation called The Mark. This album features, this came out in 2006. This song features the closest thing to a soft song, a ballad, whatever you want to call it, that Saint has, that I've heard anyway. Most of their songs are really heavy driving metal, and but the song on here that's not that way is the song He Reigns, and it is a very, very good worship song. It ties in with the Book of Revelation, but again, in some ways, it's a breath of fresh air too. But 2006, The Mark, it would be re-released a few years later under the title Revelation. I never understood that, but nonetheless, it is a concept album on the Book of Revelation. Again, an interesting listen in these times. Then an album that I've never had in my collection at all came out, called Crime Scene Earth. And initially when that album, Crime Scene Earth, was recorded, for whatever reason, Josh Kramer wasn't available to sing. Except for one song. There's a Judas Priest cover. Going back to the whole Judas Priest theme. They released a song on that album that was a cover of a Judas Priest song. I can't remember what song it is at the moment. But he sang vocals for that. But all the other songs on the album, the lead vocals were done by the bassist Richard Lynch. And fans complained about that. They slagged the album big time. I've never heard it. They slagged the album big time. I should look into getting that album. I am somewhat of a completist, so should look into getting to it. Fans, there's heavy backlash against the band for that album, releasing it without Josh except for one song. So they re-released it again, called Crime Scene Earth 2.0, that had Josh doing the vocals. Again, I never picked it up. Gonna have to see about picking it up at some point. Then Josh would return, and they would release Hellblade. This is one that I've not listened to much. Usually when I revisit Saint, I revisit the albums that I've shown here, especially the first three. But they release Hellblade, and the title track, Hellblade, heavy Judas Priest influence. So Josh Kramer would be back for that. Then the follow-up to that is called Desperate Night. Now, Josh Kramer is featured on this album, but the title track, Desperate Night, kind of sent a signal that Josh's time in the band was coming to an end after this album, because the person that would take over for vocals named Brian Williams, I believe. Brian Miller, I'm sorry. Brian Phil Miller. Um, he sang the song "Desperate." He sang the song "Desperate Night," the title track on this. But Josh did all the other ones, and that would be the end of, as of now, of me recording this, his time in the band. Brian Miller would be the featured vocalist on Broad as the Gate. This is out of the latter Saint albums that I've listened to in their entirety. This is my favorite one. There's a power metal vibe with Brian's vocals on this heavily. You might still be able to hear some of the Halford qualities in his voice, but not as much as Josh Kramer's. And We All Stand Up, again, is a song, it's like church heavy metal style. The song "We All Stand" is church heavy metal style, straight on worship. But a very enjoyable album, standout track. "We All Stand" is my favorite. The title track, "Hero" are the three ones that stand out to me on this release. Now, the second part of my pickup is the latest album that Saint came out with last year, and I haven't gotten around to picking it up till just recently. It came in the mail yesterday, and I was interested in hearing it finally. Interested in revisiting Saint again. And part of the reason why I didn't jump on it right away is they got yet another singer. Brian didn't last for whatever reason past the one album he did and song he did. So now they have a man named David Nelson at the helm vocally for the Calf. And Jeff recently showed picking up the vinyl of this. I've only heard the first two songs on it. Dave sounds like he's a solid singer. So I'm anticipating enjoying the rest of this album. I'll probably give it a spin after concluding this video. So hopefully this interests somebody out there, but thought I would make a video on a band that, even though I don't revisit them a lot lately, I do have a lot of admiration for. They were a big part of my teen years growing up as a rocker and a metalhead. So I do have fond memories of Saint. They don't perform live much. Nobody's performing live now with everything going on, but they don't. I've never seen them perform live. They did have a couple live albums I didn't feature. I had the one live album they did in 2005, not too long after In the Battle's release, which I don't have anymore. But anyway, I'm going to get out of here. We're approaching 20 minutes, so it's going to take forever to upload this, but those of you who do watch this, enjoy the rest of your evening, day, whenever you watch this, and enjoy the music.